All right, hello everybody. It's your good friend Pozzible here, and I'm here with Joe.
Hello.
And we're here today to talk about one of our favorite subjects of all time, and that is our 80's cartoons. You know, these were some of the things we grew up on. We really enjoyed a lot of these shows. And the 80's was very, some of the best shows I think ever came out during that time. And
I don't know. Yeah, I always liked the 80's too, but I have a feeling that's probably because that's when we grew up. I'm sure the kids today are saying the 90's was great.
Right. Well, the 90's had some really awesome shows, but remember, a lot of what happened in the 80's affected the 90's. You know, that people got the evolution of shows came from that time period, and also, the way certain issues were addressed. For example, we started off with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
This is probably my favorite cartoon of the 80's.
Exactly. And this is, this one is so quintessential 80's. We can say so much about it because it starts off, as you can see, this is like the first one, right? Back in the 80's.
Yes.
So things were very simple back then, very basic. You had your good guys, you had your bad guys. But it really grew and it changed and evolved, and they kept coming with all these spin-offs and, reboots.
Yeah, there was the New Adventures of He-Man, and then there was the new He-Man Masters of the Universe, which was 2002.
And you know what also is amazing about these shows is that weapons were very predominant. Though they were, they had weapons, they never really used them that much.
Yeah, well, like He-Man, his main one was Power Sword. He didn't use it to kill or to attack. He would usually wait for them to fire and then deflect it back.
Mm-hmm. Now, and of course, he had weapons. Man of Arms had his weapons, and Teela was a fighter. I remember one show that we just saw recently with He-Man and Teela attacks Skeletor. She grabs a sword, and they just do a basic sword clash. Nothing serious.
Right, it was almost like a duel.
Exactly. They were equally matched. Skeletor really couldn't defeat Teela, and Teela really couldn't defeat Skeletor. But of course, remember, what always starts off simple always grows to be really complex, as you're going to see. He-Man starts off with these basic monsters and everything, but they really come out with a lot of monsters eventually. Oh. Speaking of spin-offs, we start out with He-Man, but they had to give us
She-Ra, the Princess of Power.
Now, this was a very different show compared to He-Man.
Yeah, when in He-Man, the good guys were in charge. Evil was trying to take over the planet. In She-Ra, which takes place on another planet, the planet Etheria, the bad guys are in power, and She-Ra is leading the rebellion to try and bring freedom back to the people.
Yeah, she's the rebel leader in this case. So it kind of has a Star Wars connection when you think about it.
Old trilogy to new trilogy.
Exactly. So another great show that we love to think of is Thundercats.
Oh, I love Thundercats.
But one of the best things about Thundercats is that of all the series you're going to see, Thundercats was one that actually stayed simple. They didn't really grow too big.
Yeah, there was usually just the same, 5 or 6 heroes, and then you had Mamra, the evil guy, and his minions. I don't remember their names. I know Frog. The one guy was a frog. And
what's interesting about this whole thing, though, is that in some ways, the Thundercats, they were the intruders because their planet was destroyed. They came to this world. They named it the New Thundera, but Mamra was already there, and all these people were already there. So they're kind of the new kids on the block when it comes to this story. Interesting storyline, too.
Yeah.
So next up, we have G.I. Joe.
This is, I think, G.I. Joe is something that people, because of the new movies that are coming out, it's getting a lot more exposure. Again, this is one of my favorite cartoons from the 80's. I don't know. I'd rank it up there with He-Man and the Master of the Universe. When I was a kid, if I wasn't playing with He-Man, I was usually playing with G.I. Joe.
And yeah, when you think of the 80's, you think G.I. Joe. Again, like He-Man, very violent show because a lot of things were blowing up all the time. And, it was always an irony for me because when the show was playing and I was watching it, I got frustrated with them blowing up ships and people always parachuting out to safety. I felt that was kind of lame. But when the movies came out, I actually wanted to see that again. And a lot of people actually complained about it, saying, "Possible, that was silly. Why would you want to see something as stupid as blowing up planes with people surviving?" And I'm like, look, it was in the original show.
You got to have the nostalgia.
It's the nostalgia, but I hated it in the original show. So like I said, it's an irony. Lots of gunplay, lots of sword play, but again, nobody getting killed, nobody getting hurt. They kept it safe for kids. The main thing about these shows is that they always try to teach a moral. They always try to teach a lesson, despite and fill
Yeah.
it with action and drama. So, and again, G.I. Joe was one of those shows that started off small, but man, did it explode.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when Destro was going to come out, they were making a huge deal about Destro.
Yeah.
And that was and that just exploded into all the different characters and all the different people.
I remember Serpentor's introduction.
Of course, G.I. Joe just started off as the real American hero, eventually became the international hero.
Yeah.
I guess people didn't like the patriotism that it did invoke or something like that. Next up, we of course have this one. Now, if you look at this one, what is the show you think about? A lot of people will get it right, but in truth, this show is...
The GoBots. Actually, Challenge of the GoBots.
Right. It was just a ripoff of the Transformers. You know, Transformers came out in 1984. GoBots came out in 1985. The thing is, you can't copyright an idea. You know, there's only so much you can protect. Like, I cannot make something with Optimus Prime where he's a robot and stuff, but I can make an idea where robots change into machines.
Yeah, various... well, technically, I guess robots are machines, but they
Well, they were disguised as normal-looking machines, like, you know, motorcycles and cars. Of course, what self-respecting Transformer didn't have his guns.
Oh, yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's what Megatron changed into when he transformed into his shape. He was a big gun.
And as well as there was another character, Shockwave, who he left on Cybertron when they came to Earth. He was also a gun.
Exactly. And, you know, it's kind of redundant because when they transformed, he still had a lot of guns. They still blew things up, but of course nobody got hurt, nobody got killed. They had to keep it
not
safe.
until the movies.
Not until the movies, exactly.
Not the live action movie, but the 1986 Transformer movie.
Exactly. So next up, we're going to have Voltron. Now, Voltron goes with Transformers because, again, 1984, super machines.
Yep, 5 lions, all weapon in their own right, forming together to form a huge mega weapon.
Exactly. Voltron was the defender of the universe. He could always pull out that sword and slice in two whatever was threatening the universe at that time.
Interesting story. When I worked at Toys R Us, remember I was in the 90s, Power Rangers came out with the Megazords and everything.
Yes.
I had someone ask me, hey, do you have the Power Rangers? They're the things that Voltron ripped off. I'm like, no, ma'am. The Voltron came first.
Big time first. And as a matter of fact, it's so funny. If you ever watched Power Rangers, just as a little note, watch the Yellow Ranger. You'll notice that when the Yellow Ranger is fighting, it looks very much like a guy. And that's because in the Japanese version, where Power Rangers come from, you have 4 guys, 1 girl.
Yes.
But in the American version, they made it 3 guys, 2 girls. And so that's why if you see them fighting, you'll notice that, you know, hey,
she doesn't have a skirt.
She doesn't have a skirt when she's fighting as the Yellow Ranger. But Superman machines were very big in the 1980s. As a matter of fact, our next one, Mask, was all about super machines and about these people that could transform their cars into super weapons.
Yes, I was a big fan of Mask as a kid. I had a lot of the toys. Loved putting, you had the masks on the guys, and it was really cool how, you'd have a normal car driving down the road. Next thing you know, it's the doors open up and the back reveals a jet and he takes off.
Well, the jet also had its guns and its bombs.
Yeah,
It was the 80s. Now, Mask, I will admit, it was not one that ever really took off. It never got as complicated as the other ones did. Yeah. Things like Voltron, Transformers, G.I. Joe, and the like all started off really simple, but boy, did they ever explode into millions of characters.
Well, they ruined Mask when they changed the format of it. In the beginning, the bad guys didn't know who the good guys' secret identities were because that would destroy them as, super agents. Mm-hmm. Well, then they changed the format to where they were like, everybody knew everybody's secret identity, and it was almost like they were doing a race. I think they did like a race for something. So, when the format changed, it was like it really wasn't as good of a show.
Right, and that's one thing that always kills a show. I mean, people like the certain format, but once you start with the reboots and the revamps and the let's add this character, sometimes that can really ruin a show. Now, sometimes it helps the show. Destro certainly did not ruin G.I. Joe. All the various characters didn't ruin He-Man, but when it came to all those new characters, here's the ultimate question you have to ask. Why do you keep adding new characters? The answer is licensing. They wanted all those people buying all those dolls, I will call them. Action figures, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did not play with dolls. I played with action figures.
Exactly. All those action figures. And that's where G.I. Joe came from. G.I. Joe didn't start with the TV show. G.I. Joe started with the action figure.
I believe in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, and then eventually they said, hey, let's make a show about that. All right, next up, we're going to talk about The Real Ghostbusters, a classic.
Excellent show, yes.
You know, based off of the movie. Now, one of the reasons why they had to call it The Real Ghostbusters is because they had a television show called Ghostbusters that came out not long after the movie.
Yes.
And so they didn't want to call it Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters. That would confuse people. But since this was based off the live action movie, they got the name The Real Ghostbusters. All the characters are back. The one thing that I thought was funny is that they changed Janine a little bit. They gave her a sexier outfit and everything.
Yeah.
And Slimer was something I got a kick out of. Slimer was their pet in this show. He was their mascot. When it comes to, and instead of capturing him and throwing him back into the thing, they let him roam free.
Yeah, he was there. Like you said, he was the mascot.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they cared about him so much. They were so busy. One time, Slimer got captured again, along with a bad ghost. And they actually put him back in the containment unit with all the bad ghosts again. And Peter Venkman, who actually doesn't like Slimer, he actually had to go into the containment unit to rescue Slimer again. Because Slimer, he was a silly ghost, but he wasn't a powerful ghost. So he wasn't, with all the bad ghosts out there, he couldn't compete. So they had to rescue him from all of the other. Though, what could they really do to him? I mean, he's a ghost.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you do to a ghost? All right, that will end part 1 of our segment of 80s movies. 80s cartoon shows. Be sure to join us tomorrow when we'll be talking about other 80 cartoon shows that we really enjoyed. So we'll see you next time.
Take it easy.